Everybody, welcome and welcome back, I guess. I'm Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and if you've been watching any of my other podcasts, you'll know that regularly I have conversations with Yousaf, who is here with me today. And we've decided, because we're good friends and we operate basically in the same space, and we've got lots of things we could be talking about, we'll just basically record these conversations and see how interesting it is. I think it's interesting, and so does Yusuf. But let's see if you guys think it's interesting. So, comment, etc. So, Yusuf, welcome. Would you like to reintroduce yourself to everybody?
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm Yousaf Khan, the least technical person in AI. As Ashwin said, we get along, we speak a lot, we're good friends, we catch up often. A lot of the times, a lot of the nuggets or things that we're talking about sound interesting or sound funny, at least to us. And we always leave ourselves thinking we should have hit record. We might have to bleep out 70% of this, but hey, we'll spin it and we'll see where we land.
Love it. So let's, because we're doing this regularly, let's just talk about what we're seeing in the news and what kind of the hot topics are. And if we talk about some of the hot tech, that's great as well. But what are you seeing in the news?
So, I mean, the first one, just to kick off, because I think we'd be missing a trick if we didn't speak about this because everybody's speaking about this. So why don't we give our spin on it as well? Claude and Fable 5 and Mythos have been released into the wild again. And some are reporting that it's quite a bit more handicapped than they were expecting after the big release.
Hmm.
I know you run a lot of your operations on Claude Code. We both get sometimes quite annoying questions when it's the 95th time you've had the same question all week. What's the best AI model? What do you think about Fable? How are we going to operate if we don't have access to frontier intelligence? So yeah, I'd love to get your spin on it and see. Have you played around with it? Where do you think we are, and what do you think is going on?
So no, I haven't. I haven't played around with Fable, although I have been looking at the reports of it being nerfed in various categories. One of them, I saw this thing on Instagram, which was some graphs of performance, and one of the things that I noted in that was that the graphs of performance also showed that Fable was hallucinating less than it did in the previous release. So I don't know. Performance and hallucination seem to be something that go hand in hand. I've not played with Fable for one very clear reason, and that is I, like everybody should, I select my model according to the task that I'm doing. And it was more interesting to me to play with Sonnet 5, which came out, than it was to play with Fable, because a lot of the things that I'm doing, well, it's good enough. So I haven't played with Fable, but I've seen some of the reports out there about what it can do, and I don't know how convinced I am that this is going to be a massive game changer for things. It will change some things, but we'll come to that in a bit. What do you think?
I've not played around with it, mainly for the reason that I don't want to get attached to something that then it's going to get taken off me. So I remember when I was a kid
Ooh.
playing with new toys, and my cousins or friends would come over, and I wanted to keep the toy to myself, and I didn't want to share it, and I didn't want to play with it. My mum would walk in and say, "Yusuf, if you're not going to share, I'm going to take it off you, and you might get it back after you've sat in the naughty corner for a bit." And it kind of feels a little bit like that in the AI scene at the minute. Like there's a
Mm,
lot going on. There's a lot of very colorful, funky charts and graphs sometimes telling us what we're missing out on. But I mean, there's a few people in the space that I do respect and follow, and they're all doing funny stuff. Like, look, this is a temporary thing we're building just until July the 7th, when it might get taken off us again. And I just don't want to waste my time in those kind of areas.
mm,
And I try and take a little bit more of a blunt force approach with the tools and the toys that I've got. But I think that also leads on to maybe something quite useful for the audience, which is outside of the benchmarks and the tables and the comparisons and expert sharing of what these models can do and how they're beaten other models or how they've increased in value. What's a what's a practical takeaway that you use internally with the business around actually testing models? Like how do we move away from the leaderboards, which don't make sense to 99.9% of people? We're not trying to split atoms here. We're not trying to cure cancer with every single workflow or automation we're building. How do and how should people actually measure the difference or measure the performance in models, but in realistic ways that make sense to normal people?
Yeah, it depends a lot on what you're doing, right? I mean, we're knowledge workers, so a lot of what we're doing is we're producing we're producing digital artifacts. So whether it's code snippets, whether it's applications, whether it's articles, whether it's social media posts, whether it's snipping video, whatever it is, it's basically digital media. In the digital media space, Haiku is probably fine for most things. In the kind of chat and code work spaces, if you're doing code, maybe you need something a little bit more, but probably not, right? And the reason I say probably not is it depends on how you do code. If you're in the space of, build me Doom from scratch, and that's your entire instruction to the system, then maybe you need something that's going to go off and take independent action. But if you're not, and I'm not, I tend to structure my thought processes, fairly well. And I tend to partition my workload very well, even if I'm not using AI. So if that's the case, then, a smaller subset of models, and we are just talking about Claude, we can talk about all the others as well. I know you and I had discussions around Gemma and Quen a while ago, edge models, and how we're using. So if you're taking a more detailed approach, then probably you don't need the heavy hand of something like Opus 4.8 or something like Fable. That's kind of my thought on it. I think there are other issues though around this stuff. So the issues around things like the politicization of this and how governments are now involved in frontier models. I think that's really interesting. But first of all, over to you. Same question. I mean, how are you using or selecting your models for the different things that you do?
So again, like everything else, I take a very childish approach to stuff, which is how can I make this as simple as possible and almost as fun as possible at the same time? And testing and evaluating AI models maybe doesn't sound like the most fun thing to do, but let's have some fun with it. So I thought this was a very straightforward, simple technique, but effectively, one of the things that we were taught or programmed to believe as we were growing up was one of the scales of intelligence within humans or within people is the more intelligent or skilled someone is within a specific discipline, the more vague or less instruction you need to give them to complete a
Hmm.
task. So if I asked you to spin up an automation to do ABC, I probably just need to tell you what I want to have happen. I don't need to go into the details of schemas and databases and retrieval and this, that, and the other, because you've already got that expertise and knowledge, right? So I can be fairly vague with my instruction on my ask. I take a very similar approach with testing and evaluating different models. I'll have a single chain of a workflow, and they'll vary in complexity, but let's limit the variables wherever possible. And then when I swap out the intelligence, the simple play is how lazy can I be and how vague can I be with my input to still get a quality level of an output. And then it's fairly simple. We can measure out in a number of different ways. So for the first one, it might just be something like, and this is one of the ones that I always come back to because it's very easy for me to understand, which is pull an email from my inbox to do with A, B, and C. It might be writing a proposal, a quotation, a plan, a strategy, whatever it is, and then go and deliver the thing or build the asset, produce the thing that needs to be built at the end of it. And that's it. As sometimes it really varies how basic I be. I might just say something as simple as I've got an email in my inbox that I need to respond to. It's quite urgent. Go and read it. Make sure you understand everything that's going on, and then build a proposal and a communication route or a follow-up route that I should follow with the client to help them with this problem. And then I'll swap out the models as I'm doing this, and then basically use AI on top of that to then compare the evaluations. But I genuinely think this is something anyone can do. And one of the things I keep coming back to is there's a concept in performance which is almost good enough versus perfect. And it's that difference between 95% versus 100%. And for most things that happen in real world, good enough usually is good enough. So if I can get a good enough acceptable response or output at the end of this workflow or this chain using a tiny outdated model like a 5.4 or 4.5 mini even versus using something like a Sonnet or a Pro or a Max or any of those models, that's usually the kind of play I try and make. And as to your point, for most things that we do, we had the intelligence we needed 12, 18 months ago.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember probably still using 4.0 mini, I think, uh, for a lot of things because those mini models are fine. I don't use like OpenAI stuff anymore, but I think back in the day that was perfectly adequate. And if you're running workflows and you're calling APIs, yeah, of course you got to keep an eye on costs, token costs as well. So that's definitely a thing. But let's come to this idea of government.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned there that you don't use OpenAI models much because you're probably going to want to use them even less now when they're maybe getting into bed with the government.
Well, I turned off them when they jumped into the Anthropic deal when Anthropic had said they had red lines on things. And I thought, on balance, I'd probably want to work with a company that's able to draw lines around things like safety and, AI ethics and things like that. Now, of course, ethics isn't the only thing you make a decision on. If suddenly there was a much better model or capability in the market and I absolutely needed it for my business, maybe I'd have to rethink. But, I took that stance back when that happened. And honestly, I don't really need anything else. I'm using Google Cloud and I'm using Anthropic's system. It's enough for what I need for building the tools that I need. But yeah, tell me about OpenAI. We both read the same thing, but tell me.
Yeah, so again, I can either come at this as in the immature way I usually approach most things, so I can put my grown-up pants on and try and treat this like an adult conversation.
Let's do this with pants on.
OpenAI reportedly is discussing giving the US government 5% stake in
Mm,
OpenAI.
yeah.
And when we think about the revenue, the capital, the valuations and everything else going on, and then we think about everything you just said there about ethics, control, the Anthropic switch out with, the military stuff that was going on. Um, and we then hear that one of these frontier labs wants to give the government a 5% stake. There's a couple of different layers that we can go into with this. One being, how ethical is it for a government to be in bed with a private company where probably most of the people in the government don't understand what's actually going on behind the curtains? And then the other side of this is it one of those dodgy side of hand deals, which is going on to say, hey, look, we're going to give you ownership and stake and everything that comes with that to be part of our organization. But then what can we leverage that for? Does that mean we're not going to get throttled in certain ways? Does that mean that when we want to buy data centers or land or make investments in the future, some of those conversations might happen a little bit easier? Or is it just a power play? I mean, again, how much is the government going to stop something that they own themselves from kind of going out wider?
Yeah. I mean, both of these issues, the pulling of Fable and the investment that you're mentioning, a potential investment, I think it opens up a can of worms, right? Because the can of worms is, first of all, on the Fable side of things, what I read, whether this is the whole story or parts of the story, it was about export control and, making sure that non-American citizens didn't have access to some of the more powerful tech that's out there. And Anthropic couldn't validate the citizenship of all of its users because it doesn't ask you for that, right? So it was easier to pull it than to leave it out there. Now, of course, that raises questions around AI and data sovereignty. So I know, particularly in the Middle East, it's kind of a priority when they're considering AI systems to think about where the models are, where the data centers are, and they should be effectively domestic. And in the UK and in the EU, we're kind of happy to rent from China, from the US. And there isn't really this concept of sovereignty. There probably are data centers in the UK, but I don't know if I don't think there are any homegrown trained models that exist in the UK. I know Mistral and, in the EU. But in that space, we have this tricky decision around sovereignty because it relates to the potential equity piece and it also relates to, hyperscalers like Microsoft. So back in the day, it's less true now than it was, but back in the day, Copilot was basically GPT, a GPT-5, a GPT, I think, that kind of era of the GPT models. Copilot was that in a Microsoft system. And I was having this discussion with somebody yesterday who was saying they have somebody in their ecosystem. I can't remember if it was a friend or a partner or something that is in the AI ethics space, and they work with clients to set up AI committees and things like that for ethics. And I was asking the question, when something like this happens, when something like any of the news that we're talking about, when it happens, is it raised at the ethics committee level? Because it's a trigger, it's an event that's happened out in the media that you have to take a company stance on whether or not you agree with that and whether or not you want to continue to work with those suppliers. And, the blank face was, no, I didn't even hear of that. Well, why does an ethics committee exist if it's not able to take events that are happening from around the world as information and decide on the ethical use of AI within that company? Because that should have been a trigger event, and I don't think it was for anybody. And it should have prompted companies to rethink, am I using GPT within a Microsoft system? We're calling it Copilot, and I ethically object to that because of the stance that they took with Anthropic pulling out of that deal. It's something that needs to be debated, and it's something that companies need to make a decision on. So you've got the whole ethics side of this as well. And you've got the sovereignty play. So what does it mean for sovereignty? And the other thing is, what does it mean for democratization of frontier labs? Because if they give a stake to the US government to operate in the US, do they then have to give a stake in the EU to operate in the EU? And is this now a model where we say, well, to operate in your country, we're going to give your government a percentage of the company? These are profit-making companies. So to what degree does it matter? It's not like they're giving over revenue. I think something like a token tax or compute tax would be way more effective in supporting the future of society and universal basic income and things like that. So I'm not really sure what the value is of giving a stake in a profitless company. But these are all the issues that I see with this kind of debate. What do you think?
Again, there's many angles that we can go into, and I think the key one that's front of mind for me in this race with obviously open source and Chinese models and those kind of things is I almost see this partly as a bit of a play and also partly in the delay of OpenAI's IPO. So they were due to be filing for IPO much earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They've now delayed some of those things till next year, 2027, reportedly. Within that time period of when that switch happened, they're now giving, again, not giving, but reportedly thinking about giving the US government a 5% stake. And I think some of where this maybe plays out for the common user or for the normal man is, what does that turn into when the government owns part of the model? How much of that government and that model then gets set or controlled by government policy even further? So do we then see things like other regions and other countries outside of the US getting maybe a weaker version of OpenAI models, getting stricter rate limits, getting their data handled differently in those same things? We hear about the pressures on things like the grid and compute and even the cost of intelligence and inference and those kind of things. When it gets to the point where things look a little bit too expensive, does the US just start turning off or switching down OpenAI intelligence outside of the US, for example? The other interesting part of the seesaw is almost with the rise of things like GLM, recently that people have been discussing. The US, in some cases, seem a little bit more scared and fearful of Chinese models and open source models in many cases. So is this a way, again, just to reinforce and robust that for more of a capital and from a brand perspective than anything else? OpenAI then becomes the American intelligence, not just the frontier lab.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, potentially rate limiting, of course. I think the thing that plays on my mind the most when I'm talking about sovereignty is that if I'm in the UK, which I am, can a different country's government access all of my company data? And that's the piece. Like, I think the French government just moved away from Windows towards Linux because they were concerned about dominance in the market. So these kinds of things are going to play out at a bigger scale, I think, because it's always a little bit of a politically charged thing when companies, which are legal entities, will say we prefer US models over Chinese models. Either way, it's a foreign government. As a foreign government has access to the things that you're doing. I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other. It's just This is the decision point. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But the other thing in my mind is a 5% stake really it's not decision making, right? It's not enough equity to be a decision maker. So what's the value in that? Is it a teaser, a taster? Is it something else? What's the rationale behind that? These are the kinds of questions that I'm thinking about. But let's move on to what else are we seeing in the news?
So I don't think this will be long. And again, we both have pretty strong opinions on Microsoft as an organization and the things that they do. Again, part of what people are calling the AI bubble and what they're saying with the FDE model and everybody now moving into the services game is Microsoft's launched a $2.5 billion deployment business with 6,000 engineers.
Hmm.
Now, the old way for the last 18 months, 2 years or so, was that most businesses are Microsoft businesses. Copilot just plugs into the Microsoft ecosystem. So the adoption or enablement of AI or intelligence of Copilot was supposed to be a much smoother proposition for Microsoft and for those types of organizations. So is this Microsoft holding their hands up to say, look, we're now going to deploy forward deployed engineers to help people make the best use out of Microsoft's AI ecosystem because people are moving away from Copilot and from Microsoft and going straight to Claude and OpenAI, those kind of things. Where do we see this going? Like, do we see anything in this?
My opinion on Microsoft in the space is even as recently as yesterday, I've had conversations with real people who work in real companies who have openly, without any prompting from me, said that they get no use out of things like Copilot, but they're told to do it by their IT teams. The thread that I'm getting from nearly every interaction that I have in the market is Copilot is in every business. Nobody is really using it. They're not doing anything productive with it. There are people, of course, at every level who are trying to make do with what they've got because they have this in their system and they have nothing else to use. I also have people telling me that they're running adoption programs, right? I can't remember what it was. I saw some TV program, some comedy, one of these childish comedies that I watch. It was along the lines of somebody was saying something about selling drugs, and the response from the other person was, no, the drugs sell themselves, right? Because people want the drugs. I don't want to put any effort into it. So this whole comedic thing just reminds me of the AI adoption conversation. If the tools are good enough, people will use them. And if we go back to acceptance modeling, the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology, 40-year-long study with multiple frameworks. Venkatesh et al. 2012 was one of the models which had 7 factors to it. But performance expectancy was the greatest predictor of intention to use any technology. It didn't matter what it was across every type of technology, mobile, broadband, Wi-Fi, e-commerce, e-government, doesn't matter. Performance expectancy. It's useful for the thing that you want it to do. And if you have to run massive adoption programs to try and convince people to use this thing, it's clearly not useful. And so we've seen the doubling down. We've seen the, go and pay whatever it is a month for Copilot 365. Oh, we'll give it away for free because nobody's using it. Oh, please use our Copilot every time I open something like PowerPoint. Do you want to use Copilot? No, I don't. You open up your Outlook. Have you tried Copilot in Outlook? No, I don't want to. Right? Close. And then you have, on top of that, you got the doubling down of let's run a bunch of adoption programs. And you now have the doubling down of, right, that wasn't working. Let's throw a bunch of engineers into your organization so you can use Copilot more effectively. They're just going to keep doubling down on their really terrible product. Rather than making it better, they're just going to keep doubling down and throwing more effort at the problem. It doesn't sound like a good idea to me, and it sounds like they're failing in the market. If I can get the Claude PowerPoint plugin to do better things than the Copilot PowerPoint plugin, it's a lost battle, right? What do you think?
It was a conversation I was having with a leader end of last week, and then, I'm working with them on a couple of things. And one of the things that they said, which I wasn't really aware of, was such a big thing because I just don't really respect or play in the Microsoft game, which was effectively that there are different levels of Copilot license and depth
Mm.
that they've got for different people. So everybody gets the basic version, which is limited around, what you can do, what interactions and integrations you can build in, what other things it can use and capabilities. And then they've invested a significant licensing sum on about another 750-ish people within the organization to give them the more enhanced version of Copilot.
Yeah, premium. Yeah.
And that turned into very quickly, and it was something like within 5 days of them doing this and switching it on, they then said, we see no difference in this to the basic version. Everybody still hates it and nobody wants to use it. If we just spent the same amount on Anthropic licenses or an OpenAI licenses or our own boxes internally and put local models privately on them, we get far better experience and output and adoption by our users that want this thing
Mm.
than spending the same amount roughly in licenses with Microsoft for better versions of Copilot. And I just almost
Yeah.
think this is a bit of a reactionary thing to the market, which is almost this now. Microsoft must be seeing people either not renewing, downgrading their tiers of licenses they bought for whatever reasons, and just trying to almost beg people back into this. Look, we've now got engineers. We'll now help you make use out of it. We'll now help you get real stuff out of this.
Yeah.
Versus the other side, I don't think it's a good look. I don't think it's really going to make much difference. I don't think people are going to get much more out of it. But I will say one thing, which I posted on LinkedIn, and because this is also going out in the public domain, I don't want to, I should probably cover that. There are some things that Copilot can actually do decently well, it would be far easier and better to do these things in other places, but Copilot can kind of do stuff. It's like that annoying cousin that you get at family gatherings once a year, where it's like, yeah, we can't throw him in the bin. He's still family, but he's still one of us. So it can kind of do some stuff pretty good. It's just pretty painful to get there.
Yeah, I mean, it can do it can do a couple of tiny things, but are those things worth doing? They're different questions, right? And there's a part of me that thinks if I need to mobilize a company-wide adoption program for something that helps me write my emails just a little bit better, can we not just teach people to write better emails? Can we not just weed out the ones who can't write and pull two sentences together? There are other ways to deal with this basic issue than huge company-wide adoption programs for Copilot.
This is going to be a wild idea, right? But it almost sounds like you're saying companies should identify the capabilities and the skills that their organization needs, like communication,
Yeah,
and actually help people do those things better.
or select for those things.
What a wild idea, right?
I know, it's terrible. How dare we say this?
Cool. The next one,
Yeah.
I found this quite funny. And again, it's the whole AI bubble stuff that people have seen. But what the hell has a sandwich shop got to do with AI?
Right.
So
Go on. Say more.
What I saw this week was Jersey Mike, an American sandwich chain like Subway. They've recently filed for IPO. And one of the funny things was there's a tech IPO investor guy who pulled this out. Now, the funny thing is, almost every business in the world that's either going for funding, trying to go for an IPO, trying to get valued at something new in terms of enterprise value, now suddenly has an AI story, an AI strategy. AI has now become the backbone of what they do. So I don't know how sandwich shops are now integrating AI into everything they do. Do we have AI-powered baguettes and AI-powered... This sandwich is going to make me more intelligent than the next one. But yeah, I mean, is this getting ridiculous? Is this just the beginning? Are we going to see every business now baking AI into everything it does?
So I can see the marketing buzz of putting AI in everything. But I mean, I don't know about this story until you told me about it like 2 minutes before we hit record, right? So I can also see if it's a sandwich chain, then they have logistics, they have supply chain, they have ingredients, they have products, which are specific sandwiches, they have copy, they have images, they have, potentially marketing campaigns that go on around their sandwiches, which require content to be generated. They probably have back office functions. They have, HR, recruitment and talent. They have shift management. There's probably a lot of things that they have that could benefit from AI. So is it outlandish to say that they're using AI? I don't think so. I would expect this of any big business. Is that what they're talking about? Because that would be attractive to investors because they're leaning on things like operational efficiency, cost avoidance, and revenue generation, and top of funnel marketing activities, and et cetera, et cetera. So what's the controversy with this?
I think that the difference is, so again, I'm glad I've got you on this because you're the adult in the room, which is business process optimization has existed forever, right? Now, how many organizations, when they were going for valuations or IPOs or those kind of things, made a specific claim around those types of things
Mm,
versus this is just the operational structure and architecture that we operate in. We Kaizen and lean. We continuously try to improve what we do. This is
yeah,
how we monitor and audit them. This is how we look for improvements. These are gains we've made in efficiency or in things that affect enterprise value, revenue, profit, risk. One of those risk elements is things like, okay, do you have the right people in the business that you need when you need them? How long would it take you to avoid stuff like key man risk within senior positions and
yeah,
areas in the business? All of those kind of things. But these were just foundational practices that every business should be. There should be no business that gets that big that doesn't have a strategy about being more efficient or
mm,
performing better across every operational sphere within the business. The funny thing now is, specifically with valuations and IPOs and those kind of things, now every organization has an AI part within that
mm,
document or ledger can now say, this is specifically how we're now becoming an AI company or a forward-thinking AI company with everything we do.
mm,
So one of the things it reminded me of was, again, we've both been in the bids and tenders and those kind of spaces, and you'd see, you know, RFPs come out, and effectively what was just a 16-page menu with tick
yeah,
boxes to say we want this, that, the other thing. We want it to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. Well, by the way, we've seen this long chain of words that we don't even understand and we're not going to read, but your company must be able to do these in order
yeah,
for us to. And I almost see it like that at scale to now say, okay, when businesses are looking to go public or when they're looking to raise funds, how can they game the system, knowing that
mm,
higher valuations are being given for AI companies by now trying to position themselves as the AI version of kind of what they've
yeah.
always.
Yeah, I'm just turning my laptop fans on. It's getting hot. Yeah, I think, I mean, they're going to say, every company is going to say the things that they know that investors want them to hear, want them to do, and that investors want to hear. And in this current climate, of course, it is AI. Should they be doing this stuff anyway? Yes, of course they should. Should they be bragging that they're doing this stuff? Yes, they should, right? Every company should be saying, we've made great strides in efficiency. We've increased revenue because we've changed our operations. We're doing something innovative in our process space. I would expect a company to be telling people about this. And I'm not seeing that this is hype. I'm going to challenge that.
Mm.
I think this is, companies do put out releases and, talk about the things they're doing. And if they are doing significant stuff in the AI space, and I've outlined a bunch of things that it could possibly be without knowing anything about sandwich chains, it's possibly legitimate. I think the observation in the media probably is that AI is everywhere, and of course it is. But yeah, I'm not really seeing the hype.
Would you
What am I missing?
would you expect? And maybe I'm coming at it from maybe too much of a black and white binary point of view, but my initial feeling and read on it was no organization going for IPO or going
Yeah.
for valuation would put in a heading or a story to do with this is how we're using the internet and Wi-Fi.
Mm,
These are now just these are the almost the tools and the layers of the organization or the architecture that we're using. So should it suddenly change a valuation to say we're continuously looking at how we improve the efficiency and performance of our organization and operations versus we are now an AI native or pilled organization. And that's why we're making efficiencies and improvements in performance. And it's that kind of thing, right? You'd almost
Yeah, yeah,
expect businesses to be doing this. And if they
yeah.
weren't doing them, absolutely mark them down. Like there are a lot of businesses that aren't doing pretty foundational things that they should be doing at scale.
Mm.
But now just because they're doing the things that they should be doing, like, should we really be applauding that? And should they be getting higher valuations as a result of that?
Maybe. And, I don't know the case. But I'll add another log on the bonfire just to say, devil's advocate, I don't know. What if, and I know some companies are doing this, and I'm working with some companies that are doing this. What if they're investing significantly and heavily in AI capability? Either future-proof the business, go in new directions in terms of products, underpin a significant technical infrastructure that allows them to then move in different directions for the sake of revenue, cost avoidance, cost efficiency, etc. If they're doing some of those things, then maybe again, it's legitimate to talk about it. But I don't know the case. So, yeah. But there we go. Right. We've rounded that one off. What else are you reading in the news? I've had a week in in events and on stage. So I've mainly been exposed to that rather than like real people rather than.
So again, I think that's going to be probably far more interesting than this, because I'd love to get your sense of what you're actually seeing and hearing from real people inside real events, hopefully asking tough questions, not just nodding along nicely. So one of the things, and this might tail this into, so two kind of big things. One is there was some research that came out that said people are obviously using AI far more, almost every single day. Like the pace at which people are adopting or using AI is rapidly increasing. But on the
Yeah.
opposing side, people are trusting AI less and less. And it's become quite popular to hate on AI. And I completely see where those people are coming from because it's everywhere at the minute. You can't escape AI anywhere. But if people are trusting it less, why are they using it more? And maybe that's a question for you, mate.
So there's going to be a little bit around market penetration. I had some similar conversations at an event yesterday, and this was a mixed sort of HR group. So there were some people who come from higher education, further education, colleges and universities. There were some people from corporates. There were some people from law firms. It was quite a mixed group, and therefore we had mixed conversations. And the kinds of things that did come up, which, I know you know me well enough to know that, and if anybody's watching, you know me well enough as well, that I don't usually keep my mouth shut on things when I disagree with them. But this time I did. And I usually do on this particular thing. And that is, I'll get older people being in their late 40s to 60s. So people who are in the last 10, 15 years of their working career, who will look me in the face and tell me point blank that young people don't like to use AI, which is not something I've heard from young people. And admittedly, I don't really talk to young people. I don't have any, exposure to young people. I don't, work in schools or colleges or anything like that. But it's kind of like virtue signaling a little bit. Like we're so in touch and in tune with the next generation. And I met this guy who does research into the generational differences in tech and in work, basically. And I don't know. I don't know if I believe it. And I don't know if I believe this kind of virtue signaling of attitudes around this space. But there was some discussion around how it impacts people who are going into the workforce, what entry level means, this kind of conversation. So these things were quite hotly debated, if that's the right term, with these folks. Now, I think that attitudes which is your point, trust and things like that. I think there's more and more AI everywhere, and we can't really get away from it. And, I was not this event, but the event before that. I was looking at my Google Maps to figure out where it was. So I'm on my way walking to this place, and I've got the Google Maps out and I'm figuring out which building it's in. Yeah, I have AI in my pocket. Of course I'm going to use it. So usage is going to go up. Everybody's using this stuff as basically hygiene now. You can't get away from that. So am I surprised that usage is going up? No. The trust issue, however, I think people are becoming more aware. People being society, the massive population that we have, not particularly the workforce. I think society is becoming more aware of things because they're seeing it in the news, they're seeing it in social media, like on a daily basis. AI is dominating every single conversation. And because it's dominating every conversation, people are slightly more informed than they would have otherwise been about something that's machine learning, years ago. So Yeah, people can be skeptical about this and people can lack trust. But my kind of challenge on this is trust in everything going down? Because you see trust in government, you see trust in companies, big companies, small companies. Trust, generally speaking, is on the decline. So I would want to see that trust in AI is declining more sharply than trust in, let's say, politics or government. What do you think?
The last one will hit me quite hard because again, I think some of this speaks to like the generational gap, right? So again, the younger generations, and I think I'm hopefully on the fence of this, and I'm only saying this so I appear young. It's almost like, well, that is the cool thing to do, but I think my generation and below, we didn't trust anything, and we definitely didn't trust the authority. We definitely didn't trust leaders. We didn't trust the government, and it didn't matter which government it was. There was this whole thing of that's the system, that's the man. They want us to be in boxes. It's the Matrix. All of these, kind of things. And I have definitely had conversations and heard people say things like AI is going to be the worst thing that's ever going to happen to any of us because it's going to be the end of privacy. We're never going to be able to escape stuff. It's gonna be like the Big Brother society on steroids, where everything watched, everything's controlled, all of our data, even things like about ideas and conversations or things. So there are signals that we put out we might not be aware that we're putting out. So I only learned this quite recently. Every smartphone at the top has some kind of a face camera. Can be used to unlock your phone, security stuff, those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Right next to that is an infrared reader.
Mhm.
What that infrared reader does is about every second and a half, and I'm probably going to be out by the numbers, but it continuously takes images
Mm.
all the time, non-stop. And this is partly so when you're not looking at your phone, it doesn't unlock. But when you do look at your phone, it does unlock. Now, there are social media companies and there are organizations that have access to that data. So when you're scrolling through Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever social media or website you're looking at, it's watching the hotspots of where your eyes are going. So you don't the whole paranoia thing of I didn't even speak about it, but now all I see is A, B, and C on social media, or I'm seeing these ads pop up, or whatever it is. All of that comes from data and signals that we don't know we're putting out, but equally we're not even aware of that are being ingested by a system somewhere or being used somewhere. So when that's already been the case for a while, what does that then look like for the future of just how AI gets into absolutely everything we do? Does it now start watching the pace at which we're walking past a certain shop to see is this person interested in A, B, and C? Now, how can I send them personalized marketing messages? All the way through to did I spend a little bit longer on my social media looking at a video or a political announcement or a certain left wing, right wing, whatever the topic might be, post? And how do we then use that to find what people believe or what people will follow within society or within elections or within making decisions, and those kind of things. So there's definitely going to be that element of distrust, or not, maybe not distrust, but it's laid under negative stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's happening. I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know if intentions and ethics behind the thing are where we want them to be. Versus, I have no way of escaping this. And it's going to get to the point where none of us can realistically escape the internet. We can't escape being on the phone. We're not going to be able to escape AI. It's not going to be something we're going to be able to decide not to interact or use as it becomes baked into society and everything we do. So I think there's a little bit there, but I don't know if that's too heavy
Yeah.
for this conversation.
Well, I think with some of this stuff, we have conflation of terminology because, for example, the surveillance piece, the Online Safety Act, I think it was, the government came out with last year around you've got to put your identity documents into everything and it's going to be administered by a US company and, you can't access Reddit or something unless you put all of this, unless you upload your driver's license, this kind of thing has nothing, zero to do with AI. And yet people who maybe can't tell the difference will put the two things together and start to talk about it. So we have like an education point in this as well. The thing you just mentioned around, eye tracking was, I remember doing a couple of research projects around this back in at least 10 years ago. So eye tracking's been around for a long time for the purposes of marketing, for the purposes of optimal product placement on digital real estate, so on a screen. Is that being used for nefarious purposes? Possibly. Is AI involved at all? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what we're doing. So I think back to my point a little bit, you've got trust, the decline of trust in technology, and the decline of trust in AI specifically. And I think a lot of these things are conflated. I think people generally trust less. And why wouldn't they, right? There have been lots of, let's just take the pandemic, right? As an example, you had a health issue which affected the population. You had a bunch of reactions from different governments doing different things, whether it was PPE, whether it was furlough, whatever it was. Then you had some scrutiny around politicians who were maybe more or less economical with the truth, with the population. And then inevitably you have a decline of trust. And that's not the only big event that we've had in the last 5 or 10 years. To some degree, it's foreseeable that people trust less, but also you have misinformation on pretty much every channel. And I think these kinds of things contribute towards this lack of trust as well.
Completely agree. I think the big thing that I'm feeling and hearing is that even if it was stuff like politics or the news or the media, you almost had a choice to turn it off. You either just didn't watch the news, you didn't engage with the news, you'd swipe past it on social media. You could almost at least feel like you were escaping the sensationalism and the dramatism and the reality TV that is modern news.
Yeah.
I don't think people feel like they've got a choice anymore. And I think people feel like the choice of not being involved in AI or not wanting to use AI or not wanting to be featured within AI in some way. I think that's the thing that is probably winding people up and getting people to feel the way they're feeling.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you can't opt out of anything really. So I don't know. I'm wondering about my father, because my father is in his late 80s. He doesn't use a phone. He doesn't use any kind of wearables. He watches TV. Doesn't really go anywhere, right? He's kind of in one place. No, has he kind of opted out of AI? No, I think he still watches YouTube. So there's plenty of AI in YouTube. But I think that's the closest person that I know who's not involved in any way, shape, or form with any of the AI that we have around us. So we'll see.
Have you not got your dad killed yet? So let's see. I built my dad a little tiny little use case. Tiny. My dad, like most older brown men, likes looking at good deals and doesn't like spending more money than he has to. So why would he buy a pack of 12 toilet paper when he can buy a 75 pack of toilet paper and save 93% on per roll of toilet paper? I don't know why we're speaking about toilet paper, but that's where we are. So he used to spend a significant amount of his day and his time either reading through little flyers from Home Bargains and from Asda and Morrison's and the rest of it, all the way through to even online looking at I need new cutters for my grass trimmer. Who's selling them the cheapest within Halifax? And those kind of things. So what I've done for him now is set him up a very simple digest. There's an AI now that scans a bunch of shit that he's interested in, a bunch of stuff that he's interested in, and it sends him a message which says, hey, Yousaf, hey, Najmal, you're interested in these things? Just letting you know, there's a bargain price for this at Farm Foods right now. By the way, this is actually cheaper than their normal price because we've looked at trends of prices over the last 6 months. And he loves the thing, but he almost uses it in his back pocket so that when he's going to Farm Foods or Asda or Morrison's or the butchers to do his shopping, he's not got this little bit of intel in his pocket without looking for it. That helps him save a few more pennies.
He uses it on what, though? On a phone?
Yeah.
Yeah, my father doesn't use a phone. So
Mate,
he outsources all of this stuff to my mother, which is, there's no use case for my father to use AI. But my mother is very tech savvy. So there is that. Cool. Well, on that family bombshell, let's call it there. If you've liked this and you're watching this, if you're still watching this and you like it, follow us on every channel. Of course, Yousaf's details are in the comments or description, depending on what platform you're looking at. This will be on Spotify, YouTube, on LinkedIn, in Clips, on Instagram, in Reels. So Yeah, like, subscribe, comment, smash the bell button, whatever platform you're using. Do all of those things and more. I will see you next time.
Cheers, guys.